You're listening to Criticaleye's Asia Leadership Podcast. Criticaleye is a global membership community with over 2 decades of experience supporting senior executives in their roles. We work with board-level executives, giving them opportunities to build their knowledge, skills, and access independent reference points outside of their immediate networks. Whether you're stepping up into a more senior role or aspiring to do so, looking to hone high-level stakeholder relationships, drive operational performance, build your own personal resilience as a leader, or have longer-term career goals such as moving into a plural career, Criticaleye's approach supports a range of leadership challenges and ambitions.
Hello and welcome to the Criticaleye Asia podcast, Inspiring Leaders to Succeed. I'm Yu-Wen Hsiao, Marketing and Communications Manager at Criticaleye, and it's a great pleasure to be a host for today's episode. In today's episode, we explore what it takes to be a world-class CEO from the boardroom's perspective. So right now, in an environment defined by disruption and constant change, the role of the CEO has become more complex than ever, because it's not just only about leading the business, but also about how CEOs engage with their boards, build trust, and adapt their leadership to meet the challenges ahead. So today, I'm excited to be joined by Bruce Cox, who has over 40 years of leadership experience across global industrial and resource companies, including senior executive roles at BHP and Rio Tinto. And currently, he serves as a non-executive director for several major organizations across Asia, Australia, and the Middle East. And right now, as a Criticaleye Board Mentor, Bruce brings the expertise in governance, strategy, and business transformation to help leaders drive growth and navigate change. So, Bruce, thank you so much for being here. To get us started, could you please tell us a bit about your background and your professional journey?
Okay, thanks very much for the opportunity to speak here. So as you mentioned, got a background in heavy industrial manufacturing, mining, mineral processing environments. Probably brings some colour to how I answer some of the questions later in this podcast. I've had the pleasure of working and living in the US, Zimbabwe, Chile, UK, Canada, and I think I've probably worked across most states in Australia as well. So I had a wonderfully diverse career. The first half of my career was focused in finance, leading to CFO roles. The second half of my career sort of started to go into Chief Operating Officer and CEO roles. And that background is now all leading to the 4 non-executive director roles that I have today. As many will know, the CFO is often the right hand or the left hand of the CEO. This provides development and exposure that enables a natural transition with time. So I've always been keen and interested in the operational aspects of running a business. So the transition to operational and then CEO positions kind of was natural for me. My first CFO role was in platinum mining and mineral processing operation in Zimbabwe. It happened to be the largest investment in Zimbabwe's history at that time in the early 90s. Fantastic opportunity and experience in a semi-difficult country to operate. My next senior CFO role was in Chile, at the world's largest copper mining operation. It was called Escondida. It was of interest for some. It was located in the Atacama Desert, the driest desert in the world. So largest copper mine, but in the driest desert in the world. So again, very, very interesting. Within a few years, I became the CEO of the diamond business for Rio Tinto. So I had operations in Australia, Canada, Zimbabwe, Madhya Pradesh in India, and then marketing operations in Belgium, the US, and India. And my last executive role was responsible for a number of aluminium smelters, aluminum refineries, and bauxite mines, with probably in excess of $10 billion in assets and about 6,000 employees. So once finishing my executive career, it was Charlie Wagstaff, that many of you will know from Criticaleye, who convinced me to continue my career as a portfolio non-executive director and give back to society what's given to me in a very, very rewarding career to date. So now I'm on the boards of Aluminium Bahrain, the world's largest single-site aluminium smelter. It's listed on the stock exchanges in Bahrain and London. UT, a large equipment supply, mining and mineral processing conglomerate, approximately number 15 on the Indonesian Stock Exchange. Aurelia Metals, it's a polymetallic, in other words, lots of different minerals, mining company listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. And lastly, I'm on the advisory board for Ajlan Brothers, which is one of the largest industrial conglomerates in Saudi Arabia.
So Bruce, as you just mentioned, your career has been CFO, CEO, and now influential net positions across global organizations. So how have these different roles shaped your understanding of what the great leadership looks like at the top level?
So in my mind, great leadership has a commonality across whatever level or role you're in, including self-leadership. So it's probably the broadest skill sets and experience you have combined with a solid leadership capability that enables success as a CEO. But as I said, leadership qualities are largely consistent no matter where you are in an organisation. Probably their impact is more important, of course, at the CEO level. In my career, I found a number of leadership qualities really quite important. The first one is probably empathy. But that empathy comes from a deep understanding of yourself, and that'll be probably a theme I'd like to talk to throughout this discussion. I think the next leadership desire or process is a desire to coach people for success. You want to see people be successful. If people beneath you and around you are successful, of course, you'll be successful as well as a CEO. I think a predominant view beyond the short term, and what I mean by that is, of course, there is a short-term deliverables, but the predominant view should be for the long term in terms of the delivery inside a business. I think leadership is the ability to admit when one is wrong. I feel that you have to be resilient and show that resilience and show a level of optimism in terms of being a leader. I think you need to show a willingness to make decisions and then to be held to account. And probably lastly, of a reasonable list of key important qualities of leadership, I feel there's an importance in recognition of the positives in others. Look to people's strengths rather than focus on their not so strong areas. You leverage strengths, you don't leverage weaknesses. And so I think they're some of the core elements that I've seen have the most impact in a positive way in terms of leadership.
So Bruce, looking back on that shift from executive to non-executive, what were some of the key challenges or mindset changes you had to navigate when joining the board?
Yeah, this is an interesting one and important in terms of the change and differentiation between being a CEO and being on a board. As a board member, you're no longer the decision maker, or you're no longer running the business as such. You're supporting the CEO and his team in their success. So this is very challenging for people that are used to being in control. Your role is now asking the right questions to open up key insights, and on rare occasions, and I mean rare occasions, offering advice. Being on a board is even more about influencing rather than directing. And again, so from the CEO to the board, quite a difference there, that it's an influencing role and not a directing role. So boards only really work if they're full of strong, independent individuals, but who are very, very collegiate and know the success of an organisation is dependent on them working as one team. So the ex-CEO who joins a board, for the first time, who was once looking and looked to as the final decision maker, now once again becomes a member of a team of peers. And as a CEO, they weren't. They were at the top of the pack, and now they're part of a team and need to be a collegiate part of that team to help drive and influence the performance of a business as a whole. So quite different from a CEO to moving on to a board of directors type role.
And Bruce, drawing from your experience on boards around the world, what qualities and behaviors do you believe defines an exceptional CEO? Are there any traits that stand out as universal, or is there any expectations differ depending on the market and the cultural context?
So I suspect there's always going to be a little bit of difference of emphasis as to what's important depending on the circumstances of the organisation and the level of stress and transformational change that organisation is going through. But probably some key qualities that and skill sets that are required for success. I think the first is about the person, the human. I think you've got to start with the person has to, or the CEO has to be quite self-reflective. And even though they got to be successful because of their ego and hubris, if they can't manage that, that will undermine their success. So they need to use what was a strength to get them there as a basis for managing and self-reflecting to be a better leader. I think they need to be very inquisitive about the world. They need to be inquisitive about their organisation, and in particular, inquisitive about who they are and how people perceive and react to them. Because it's only through that inquisitiveness that you actually self-reflect and learn, and then you have a solid basis for influencing others. Probably an understated, it seems obvious, but I think commercial and business acumen is incredibly important. And I think the jobs and roles that people have accumulated over a long period of time need to ensure that that commercial and business acumen is there for success as a CEO. I think the leadership style of people needs to be largely through inspiration and vision, not on fear or pressure. Now, depending on where the organisation is and if it's facing critical elements in terms of its environment, maybe you have to change that style a little bit. But in the long run, inspiration and vision are certainly the elements of leadership that lead to success in the long term. I think it's really important that the person, the CEO, doesn't lose perspective on the importance of the basics of making an organisation work. Yeah, good people systems, excellent project management, and good supporting systems, focus on metrics and performance. One can't lose the perspective of what are the foundations that make an organisation work, and that attention to detail is really quite important for organisations. I think the CEO has to have a realisation and embody that competition and the competitive mindset is every day of the week. And though you're entitled to celebrate success, tomorrow there are still competitors trying to make and take your market share. So this means really fostering a culture and business model of relentless and constant innovation and business improvement. I think another important quality or thought process for the CEO is the ability to fail fast when an idea is not working out. So Amazon, for example, excels in this space. So investing large amounts of money in an idea, if it doesn't work out within a reasonable time frame, you have to learn how to fail fast and move on and reverse that decision. And for me personally, one of the important elements of being a good CEO is being truly versed in the art and the science of negotiation and influencing. Every conversation is a negotiation in some form, and the number of stakeholders that require influencing the CEO's role is diverse and numerous.
Also, Bruce, when it comes to assessing the CEO's performance, how do boards evaluate the leader's ability to steer organization through uncertainty and transformation?
So I suspect the evaluation process for a CEO is no different from the evaluation of any individual in an organisation. However, in the case of the CEO, the advantage is that a board is made up of generally highly skilled, highly experienced, highly seasoned individuals that can help provide really quite constructive feedback through the chairman. And I think that feedback can help the CEO grow if they're open to that feedback. If I have an observation from my experiences, and I think this is true in terms of evaluation processes for everyone, including the CEO, but every level within organisation, I think the feedback loop and loops need to have both structured and unstructured elements and processes to ensure that there's an active, supportive feedback loop that's constant. And I suspect the loop and the frequency of that loop of feedback is even more critical and more timely and important in terms of when there's organisational strain and stress inside an organisation. I feel it's essential that the organisation understands, reports, and discusses what are the critical metrics of success, supported by key organisational milestones for deliverables. In the same way that a CEO holds his reports to account, the board must do the same with the CEO. So I think there's sort of that risk that you get to such a senior level that you go and move away from the basics of having metrics, milestones, targets, and holding the organisation to account against those. With respect to your point in the question around steering through uncertainty and or transformation, I feel that the advantage that the CEO generally has is the experience base of the board members to help draw from that experience. And I think CEOs need to take advantage of the people around them.
Bruce, explain what you just said. And during a moment of crisis and rapid change, what behaviors help a CEO maintain or even deepen the trust and the confidence from the board?
So given that the board is the more senior in the org design and structure, it's incumbent upon the board and the board members to be quite cognizant, quite thoughtful about this in terms of the relationship with the CEO. I think the first is openness and transparency from the board based on an empathy and knowledge of the circumstances that the individual is in. Being a CEO is really a very, very lonely process. As I've said before, you're not part of a management team. You're by yourself. I think the board needs to think through the social process to ensure that the CEO actually has support mechanisms, given it is quite a lonely position or role. Probably my other observation, though in camera, in other words, board discussions without the management team or the CEO in the room, in camera board discussions without the CEO are helpful to gain board alignment. They need to be used with care and with clear feedback immediately afterwards so that the CEO does not feel that there's a hidden agenda. So in-camera sessions is really important, but it can create a concern with the CEO if they haven't had shared with them what was discussed in that in-camera session.
And Bruce, maybe we're turning now to the board dynamic more broadly. So what behaviors and mindset have you seen great CEOs adapt to build and sustain strong partnership with their boards over time?
So I feel the inexperienced CEO often sees a board as a bit of a burden that they need to bear rather than a tool to be used to enhance the business. And part of the reason for that is that, boards need to provide a lot of information. They take CEO time from what the CEO might regard as their day-to-day job. So often they see that it's a burden to be managed rather than one to be leveraged. I feel the great CEO respects his board and its individual members and listens much more than they talk, and also actively asks for the board's input and advice to enhance their decisions. The CEO, in nearly all respects, is the ultimate decision maker inside an organisation and how he runs that business. But the advantage of CEO is that they have access to a diverse range of highly experienced individuals in the board. So why wouldn't you at least use their input to help shape your decisions? So I think as a CEO matures, they come from maybe resenting the board to actually seeing it as one of their potential strengths.
And Bruce, from your experience, what successful CEO do differently to influence and align their boards around critical decisions?
It's a bit like leadership. I suspect influencing skills are fairly universal, but in the case of the CEO, they're much more honed and they've got to that role because they are highly experienced in that. But the key for me, which are probably universal skills, is listen and respect the key people involved in any key decision, show empathy for the negative impacts of a particular decision, actively involve, seek advice from those involved in a decision, and provide feedback and transparency around the decision criteria. So given a CEO is involved in so many decision processes and has influence on the change management of so many elements and aspects, inside an organization. I feel the key aspects I've just described are essential for him in terms of his processes, but also in terms of the coaching of the people beneath him to ensure that they actively adopt the key elements of change and change management.
And Bruce, reflecting on your own leadership journey, how have you kept learning and evolving as a leader? Are there any approaches you found valuable that you would highly recommend to today's CEOs?
So my first advice, and it may seem a little strange, but to keep a life diary. Keep a life diary dedicated to key life and business learnings with which you go back and reflect periodically. So if you haven't started a life diary, buy a nice book with which to write and start writing. Every time you have a key epiphany or learning, it's an opportunity to write it down and then reflect on it in the years to come. And I think you'll grow as a person and as a leader and as a business CEO or whatever role that you aspire to. I think you'll be better for it in terms of life's journey. So that life diary, I think, is something that I think is very, very powerful. Emotional intelligence, I think, is a critical element of you understanding yourself and how you influence others. So if you haven't had a diagnostic of your emotional intelligence skill sets, which will include self-awareness, impulse control, internal drive and motivation, empathy, your outlook, your optimism, your resilience. There's a couple of excellent books that have been written on emotional intelligence. I think it's one to reflect on, but it's one to get that 360-degree review process to understand how people perceive you in terms of that emotional intelligence. I mean, most CEOs, by definition, they've got there by having high cerebral intelligence, but the emotional intelligence is often one area that they could still keep growing in. And I feel even in my early 60s, I've still got my journey to keep growing in terms of that emotional intelligence. I think using resources that are available to you, like Criticaleye, I think is absolutely an excellent opportunity. And I've been with Criticaleye for a number of decades now, and I've got so much out of Criticaleye networks and advice that I've got through various people that I've been linked to through Criticaleye. And I'm going to emphasize my negotiation skills. I think no matter where you are, if you haven't had formal negotiation skills training, I think it gives you great life skills and it gives you great business skills.
Thank you so much, Bruce, for your insights. So to wrap up our conversation, is there any final piece of advice you'd like to give to CEOs who are looking to strengthen their leadership and board partnerships?
So maybe what I'm going to do is just summarize the key thoughts that I've talked about through this process. I think the first is you've got to trust and utilize the skills available to you through your board. Trust your board, use your board. They can be your strength and they can help you grow as an individual and as a CEO. So work with the belief that the board is there to help you to be successful. The reality is it's in their interests for you to succeed because through your success, they succeed as a board. I think my advice is to be constantly inquisitive about yourself, how people react to you, and be persistent in looking for constructive feedback. I feel you have to admit when you've made a mistake and learn from it, and from that, fail fast, if and when this is required. And the last, I maybe haven't mentioned, but I think you have to delegate and trust, but measure performance.
Thank you so much, Bruce, for sharing your insights and your experience with us today. Your perspective on the evolving role of the CEO, the importance of building trust with boards, and the value of continuous learning is truly inspiring. So thank you very much for your insights.
Okay, thanks very much for the opportunity.